and welcome to another episode of Right at 8, the series on books and authors from Bakul Foundation. Well, I'm sitting here at the Bakul Library in Bhubaneswar. Now, when we set up the Bakul Library, the idea was to demonstrate the power of volunteerism, what ordinary individuals can do with their little contributions. So every book in this library, and by the way, this is not a wallpaper, this is a physical rack, and you can pull out books from this. So every single book in the library has been donated by people, and that is how this library has happened. That is how the other Bakul libraries have happened. Now, when we started Bakul, the idea was not only to set up libraries, but as I said, it was to demonstrate the power of volunteerism. So many people have got involved, and that is how we have had many other programs. The volunteers got together, and many of them felt passionate about the environment. So we have many environmental initiatives as well, other than promoting reading, which is a very core activity to us. So we were all bothered about climate change. So 12 years back, Bakul started in 2007, this library and the organization as well. And in 2009, we started one of our major campaigns, which is called the My Tree campaign. We thought about what can we do about climate change. And those of us in Orissa, many of us in the audience are also in Orissa, and we say that we don't have to think about global warming. We just have to think about what is happening right here. There was a movie which was called Climate's First Orphans, and which was set in Orissa. Because you talk about freakish weather patterns, you talk about the frequency of natural disasters, we face it all. I mean, where else in the world do you have children who don't know when their summer vacation will start? That happens in Orissa, because our summer schedule of school depends on the mood of the sun. Now, that is as close as it gets to being affected by climate change. So one of the things that we have tried to do, because the idea of Bakul is not about what Sujit or a few other volunteers who are working with him do, but the idea is, can we talk about simple ideas that others can do, that can get viral? And that is how we started one of our major campaigns. Like, one of our signature activities is the libraries that we have set up with public contributions. Another major campaign has been promoting the culture of gifting plants, because that is what we thought. If tree plantation moves beyond merely an event to a culture, where it becomes a part of the everyday lives of people, where we value it, where there is an importance that is given to trees in our own life, where we have a personal relationship with trees. Like we say, we are possessive about my car, my pen, or my whatever, my books. Am I possessive about my tree? So we ran a very fun campaign. Maybe we'll see a little video before we go on to the show. But let's see the video first, and then we'll go on with the show. So that was a campaign. We said, you don't need a reason to gift a plant. But of course, if there's any reason, like a birthday, a wedding, death of a loved one, the best way to show that you care is by gifting a plant. And the best thing is, it's an idea that can get viral. And in the 12 years since we started this campaign, we are very happy that the idea seems to have picked up significantly, at least in Orissa, and I see that happening all across the country. But about Bakul later. I don't want to talk about that. So I'll tell you how this show happened. So when Vinita Agrawal, an eminent poet, she reached out, and who had just come out with a book, a beautiful book, Open Your Eyes, an anthology on climate change, which features all our eminent poets featured today. And she reached out saying that she would like to have a session. I said it was like something that dropped from heaven. So something that we is so close to our heart because of the twin things about poetry and books and climate change. I was very happy. I'm really thankful to her for wanting to do this show with us. Now, I'll just introduce the poets and then hand it over to Vinita ji to take it forward. Uh, so, Vinita ji is, of course, an award winning poet, editor, translator, and curator. She's the author of 4 books of poetry, and she's a joint recipient of the Rabindranath Tagore Literary Prize 2018. Apart from other prizes, she's the poetry editor with the Usawa Literary Review, and she has been the judge of many literary prizes and is on the advisory board of the Tagore Literary Prize and has curated many literary events for Pen Mumbai. So we are very happy that Vinita ji is there and she will be chairing the session, really. We have the doyen of English poets in India, Keki Daruwalla, who is one of the most eminent poets that we have, who's also been awarded the Padma Shri. Of course, he's got the Sahitya Academy Award in 1984 for his collection, The Keeper of the Dead. Now, there are many young poets viewing this show, and I know all of you are worrying about how to get published. Okay, if the poetry is good, like Keki Sir's, he has been published by all the leading publishers, in the country and internationally, be it the Oxford University Press, Simon and Schuster. His collected poems has been published by Penguin, and of course, Rupa, Orient Black Swan, you name it. And of course, the Wikipedia says now he becomes much more interesting in a way also that the Bollywood film Refugee, which I have to see now, is apparently inspired by his story because he was also an Indian police officer in the Indian Police Service. So we are very honored to have Keki sir with us. We also have very
Thank you.
eminent. Thank you, sir. Priya Chabria, who is an award-winning poet, translator, and writer known for her radical aesthetic. She is the author of Not Springtime Yet, published from HarperCollins, and edits poetry at Sangam. Chabria, along with the poet Ravi Shankar, has also translated the songs of the 8th century Tamil poet Andal in her book Andal, the Autobiography of a Goddess. The book won the 2017 Muse India Translation Award, and her speculative fiction Clone, which has been published in India by Zupan and by the University of Chicago Press, has been listed by the Feminist Press as among its 2018 best reads. So again, very honored and very happy to have Priya Chabria with us. K. Srilata, I just discovered, happened to be many years my senior at the University of Hyderabad, is a very eminent poet and also happens to be a professor of English at IIT Madras. Her poetry has been published in, again, many anthologies of Indian English poetry, including the HarperCollins Book of English Poetry, and in the Arundhati Subramaniam edited Another Country, an anthology of post-independence poetry in English from the Sahitya Academy. She has also co-edited The Rapids of a Great River, the Penguin Book of Tamil Poetry, and she's also part of the team that runs the Yavanika Press, an e-publishing site specializing in poetry. So a lot of you young guys out there who are writing poems and wanting to publish, you can also look up their profiles on Wikipedia and elsewhere on the internet, and you can find a way to contact them and send in your poems. And of course, we have the poetry contest that we had on the sidelines of this particular event, and Vinita ji will declare later about the winners. But as of now, Vinita ji, over to you, and welcome all of you to Bakul Foundation, and I welcome all the audience also to to a wonderful evening of poetry and provocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujit Mahapatra and Bakul Foundation, for this warm and lovely space. Thank you for that warm introduction for the panelists. And thank you for also for that heartwarming video that you just played about trees. And I would just like to pick a line from there where you said that you don't need a reason to gift trees. Yes, but you do need many reasons to save trees. It's going to be about climate change this evening, and all our panelists have some wonderful work to share with you. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'll dive straight into the event, and I will request and invite Priya Sarukai Chabria, to please read her work on the theme of climate change. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Vinita. I'm honored to be on this show which is with Bakul Foundation, because their work is really very inspiring, and your anthology is wonderful. And I'm also delighted to be reading with you and Keki and Srilata. Srilata, it's an exceptional evening. So with that, I'll begin reading my choices from here. I thought I'd focus on the international aspects, the poets who've written here. So I'll begin with Ruth Padal, who has 6 short poems put together on water. And I'm choosing one of them, and that is Water, a banquet at the water table. Who owns beneath? I am the reservoir, trapped in blue rock, bubbling away to myself, and in the transition zone between the upper and lower layers of Earth's mantle, which Time magazine says will solve everything. What happens to the heat and the pressure holding the planet together if you take me out? And after that punchy poem, I'd like to go into reading another very strong poem by Alvin Pang, the Singapore-based poet. And this is called Limit, where he speaks actually about elite anxiety and, well, I'll read the poem. Limit. Mounting evidence of an existential threat to civilization. Cascading causes and effects, the hawk crying over a desert freed of words, a white bear thinned to pity on a sliver of ice. The heads of government talk the talk, not of risk and shock, but impunity regardless, surviving on top even of a heap of cinders. A tip at the heart of now, sovereignty. The climatologists check their findings again, hoping to be wrong. The winemaker says this is a good year for the high end, but for the bottom tier, it's drying out, lacking the margin of water. Which teaches the young, why teach the young this green stuff? The Perm Secretary grumbles, it's bad for business. The bushfire says the same, only more fiercely. The politicians say, well, just listen. It's sexy now, time to stock up on solar, galoshes. Going vegan won't help, warns a new report. The priest says, wait. The children of weather, the lovers, would let the world drown just to live together. It's always about coping against hope. It's always about coping against hope. Not much else to do, being so small. Headlines say nothing about where the news will stop or what to do after you've crossed the line at last. The last real year you felt good in your bones. And now I'll go to my own a piece which is not a poem, but it is a midterm ecolit examination paper set in the near future. And it's an examination paper because I want the reader to be bang in the center of the poem. So it has 4 sections: fiction, non-fiction, translation, and poetry. And each has marks. The first is fiction, and I'll read you a couple from each. Fiction. Write 4 lines answers to the following questions, 5 marks each. 1 question. Why was the term Mother Earth used across literatures? Another question. Why is light associated with revelation in all literatures? Then we move to non-fiction. Here again, you have to say, you the reader have to say if the following statements are true or false. 15 marks allotted to this, 15 questions, of which I'll read about 3 or 4. Fossil images of trilobites, traffic jams in 480-million-year-old oceans reveal migration is intrinsic to life. The koala was not always an endangered species. Their fingerprints are so indistinguishable from humans that they were, on occasion, confused at crime scenes. Fungi warp our sense of time, as we cannot accurately date whether they are born or die. What time? Right or wrong? Deep time mapping of the Antarctic revealed 3% of ice in these glaciers was penguin urine. False or true? When the astronauts first saw the blue planet from space, 70% of the Earth's surface was covered by water. It is now 73. True or false? Next, we move to translations, where you can choose any 10 phenomena that still exist and translate these into a contemporary Indian language. 20 marks for this, 20 options. Translate. Plastic water islands, dew on lotus leaves, fracking industry, species crossing pathogens, mantling stars, polar star wonder. And now we go into poetry. And the question is, what significance does this political poem of the 21st century have today? 15 marks. It's a poem called Invocation, Spirit of Water. It's both a prayer and a plea, written by me, actually in a book which KKG edited. Invocation, Spirit of Water. Make me dew that touches all without distinction. Like snowflakes, let my perfect structures yield to the melt of being. As an underground river flowing through drought, make me draw from secret sources. Sweet and salt, estuarine, let differences mingle in my blood. And tidal courage, I call upon you to return after the ebb. Spirit of water, give me hope. Print on me oceans covered with sky when fiery fissures open. Remind me of life. Fill my marrow with glacial ice that cuts rock to nourish springs. Add one more wish to this. Make me a mountain lake, calm and deep, that reflects light. Make me a mountain lake, calm and deep, that reflects light. And the last question you have to answer in this paper is, why do you think climate breakdown can still be reversed? Give 6 reasons referencing multi-species ethnographic literature. 30 marks. Thank you.
Yeah, that was absolutely marvelous.
Thank you.
And we will talk more about what you read and about your poetry and your contribution to the book when we go into the discussion. But I would like to
Thank you.
invite Daruwala right now. And I have to confess that I am privy to some of the work that he's going to read this evening, and it's absolutely soulful. I invite you, Keki, to please read out something on climate change and whatever else that you would like to read.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yes. I hope I am. Thank you, Vinita ji. And I'm honored to be on this panel with Srilata and Priya Sarukai Chabria, old friends, if I may say so. I will read the. I have been remiss. I wish I had prepared myself for reading from the other poets in the anthology. Well, uh, at the moment, I'm not really prepared, and I'm going to read two or three poems from written by myself. Sorry for that. This lovely anthology, and I'm very proud to be included in this. Iceberg at Abu Dhabi. I'd always felt this that one day the our icebergs will come to our Indian Ocean one day, and we'll see them because the way we are uh, warming up at the moment, the Earth. Iceberg at Abu Dhabi. If you are a Jeddah, as I am, and it is night, you can't believe it is night. For a million small suns, though not in the sky, are at port, blazing through glass, tube, and globe. Eyelids and cornea splinter and fall like insect wings after Indian rain as they gaze at the lightfall. Sorry. This isn't night, it's eye tearing day. The dazzle ferried from some region bordering night. A billion lights burning to show ships coming from air and screeching on hard land. I am the baby iceberg, torn from mother. I broke away, blessed by her. She seemed off her rocker, shouting, "Who knows when we are transcribed into existence? Go." What the hell did she mean? Iceberg thinned, water roar broke the membranes around my ears, and I moved like voyagers who sailed the Caribbean in the times when Jews were thrown out of the Iberian landmass, as big as the ice country I had left. We meet again at Abu Dhabi for tomorrow. I'll be there. This I don't write about climate change, not in poetry, and this was written at the behest of Vinita Agrawal, and I wrote a poem last evening, and this is called Shabby Hut. In the shabby hut of his old age, backbone and rafters creaking, axe lying with the firewood of his hopes, cluttering up the room. He went over his poems in the cold by candlelight and tallow light and couldn't for the life of him find what had triggered them into script. How a rhyme twined its legs around an image and wondered who could have written this. Like the lichen in Alaska, stiff and mottled, that cannot remember the 5,000 years of ice that covered it. Alaska was covered by ice for about 5,000 years, and now the soil, the earth, rises 1 inch each year, because of the pressure of the 5,000 years of ice, uh, that the earth was pressed down, and now it keeps rising. I have a poem called Bakula, and uh, that gels with the ages, and we are reading poems, the Bakula. Half hidden by shrub, the mother fox watched the rainyards playing with a boy who didn't know they were fox cubs, and a pregnant Nilgai walked fearless on the empty mall. Stragglers reached for cameras, not guns, and the peacock with its plumes quarried from a turquoise mine, its call inlaid with metals, danced on the tower, not knowing it was not supposed to dance here. Salt Flats, Salt Flats looked out for flamingos who never came, and the mauve carnival of feather and down that did not descend on waiting eyes, and the French lady with the semi Mesopotamian name, which had sailed down the Tigris as her naming ceremony was underway, looked out of the window and found a bakula with its aphrodisiac petals, the tree which sends out its flowers only when beautiful women rinse their mouths with sweet wine and let go on the stem, which wore a tiara of black beads around it. When all this was observed by someone on his morning walk on the Andromeda galaxy, the one nearest to us, he called out to his beloved, "Look down, it's not such a bad planet after all." May I read another poem or two?
Yes, yes, please. Privileged to
Sorry,
hear you. Yes, please do read.
can I read another one or two?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay, thank you. Uh, I'll read a poem called Wolf. I was at a reading by a Canadian poet of Indian origin, and after he finished his poetry in the Connaught Circus, I walked up to him and introduced myself, and he said, "I teach your poem in class." That was the Wolf. So I'm going to read it. Firelit, uh, and well, when we were when I was younger, if I may say so, 40 years ago or 50 years ago, we used to hear jackals in the plains, in the wilds, in the hills. I lived about 5 years in the hills, Joshimat and Ranikhet, and we used to hear the jackals, just as uh, people earlier used to hear wolves. Firelit, half silhouette and half myth, the wolf circles my past, treading the leaves into a bed till he sleeps, black snout on extended paws. Black snout on sulphur body, he nudged his way into my consciousness. Prowler, wind sniffer, throat catcher, he cries. His cries drew a ring around my night. A child's night is a village on the forest edge. My mother said, his ears stand up at the fall of dew. He can sense a shadow move across a hedge on a dark night. He can sniff out your approaching dreams. There's nothing that won't be lit up by the dark torch of his eyes. The wolves have been slaughtered now. A hedge of smoking gun barrels rings my daughter's dreams. And the last one I'm going to read is slightly is light, and it's called Of Sages. And it's also what a slap on intelligence agencies. Our sages were kind, dressed in their long beards and short loincloths. This comes from a book, Night River, published in the year 2000, so it's 20 years old already. Our sages were kind, dressed in their long beards and short loincloths, their rudraksh beads and their wooden sandals, which went clackety clack as they walked or moved or said their beads. Their intensity was so fierce that smoke rising from the object was the first you knew that the bloody thing was on fire. A major duty of the secret services of the numerous fiefdoms was to find out if some ash smeared rogue was concentrating on their king. So half the poor guys in these services also had to sport large beards and short loincloths. There were no jock straps available. The service chief, busy preparing his wish kanyas, those poison wombed concubines for the neighboring king, who would die even as he cohabited with them, would order his men to go forth and seek. And they went forth with their gauds called commandalus and their fire tongues, looking all amongst caves for the echoes of some lethal chant or some demon lost in penance, seeking immortality or worse, eternal virility. But there were many who never got within range of a murderous mantra or a demon frozen in penance. Such agents were bored, and in his anger, one of them would start practicing austerities and focus on the chief of the Secret Service himself. And the first that the poor fellow, busy with his wish kanyas, would know of all this was when his navel or his loincloth would of a sudden start smoking. Thank you.
Oh, that was amazing, Keki. That was a privilege, an absolute privilege to listen to you. And you had an amazing repertoire of poems that you presented. Thank you so much.
Many
And
thanks.
I would love to talk more about them in the discussion and remind you of a particular poem that I was hoping that you would read today, but that will come later. May I now invite Srilata to present her work to us. She also has some amazing poetry. Her poem in the book is absolutely stunning, and I'm sure she's going to read it out to you amongst all the others that she's lined up. Over to you, Srilata.
Hi, thank you so much, Vinita, and such a privilege really to be reading alongside Keki and Priya and you. Thank you also to Bakul Foundation. I'll begin by reading from the poem that Vinita featured very kindly in her anthology, beautiful anthology, Open Your Eyes. The poem is called Reading at One Remove. And it gestures to the rich bioregionalism of the Sangam poems of the ancient Tamils. So, so if only we had heeded the ancient Tamils. So, in the chapter on Aham poetry, the Tolkappiyam lays out 4 different kinds of landscapes, each presided over by a deity and named for a flower or a tree characteristic of the region. And there are various phases of love that unfold in these various different landscapes, right? So, emotions as being tied to landscapes, essentially. So, this poem is called Reading at One Remove. Dipping into a Sangam poem, she can read only in translation. She tastes the imagined sweetness of a language she never learnt. Earth language from another time that could summon rain and tall blue hills and kurunji flowers. Reading at one remove, she swims in the blueness of rainfall, hills, and kurunji blossoms, forgets briefly the palai, the desert that is her body, its varachi, dryness, its daham, thirst. This next poem is called Our Days Would Catch on the Cruelest Thorns, written partly in response to the pandemic experience, which, as we all suspect now, quite rightly, I think, is tied to climate change, really. So this was written on the eve of the pandemic's official arrival in India, when everything seemed right with the world, but actually wasn't, when I was out on a bird watching trip to the fast shrinking wetlands in Chennai. Our days would catch on the cruelest thorns. We placed our hopes on the first of the migratory birds. They had arrived, and so all was well and would be. Seasons would proceed as they were meant to. Girls would grow up, become women. We didn't know it then, that the birds would find their way home, that seasons would proceed as they were meant to, but our days would catch on the cruelest thorns. I would now like to read a haibun written by fellow poet and dear friend Shobana Kumar. It's called Barter, and this was also featured in Vinita's Open Your Eyes anthology. Barter. After the rains, the ride on the highway is magical. Lush green hills pop from every corner. Lazy clouds hover around hilltops, pause at the stunning blue sky before they decide to move on. All along the way, neon signboards announce names of nondescript villages. The road cuts into farmlands. Paddy fields gleam like emerald strings. On another patch, a group of women get ready to plow the soil. How many kilos of rice are we speeding on? Piggy bank, all the blessings we don't count. Piggy bank, all the blessings we don't count. I'll now, if I may, read you some haibun, that a form to which I came quite recently. Basically, a Japanese form that combines prose poem with the haiku, just like Shobana's haibun that I just read out. This is called, this haibun of mine is called Roots in the Sky. It's a series of short little haibuns. And why do I remember the 13th of March? I'm waiting in the light dappled courtyard of the old school. My daughter, the one I have held close like a hatchling all these years, is to appear for her school leaving exam. Around me, the nervous giggles of young people rise like soap bubbles, a flash of parakeet in the liquid skies, and I think of my daughter's difficult growing up. The slow drip of a tap, one last exam. The slow drip of a tap, one last exam. The first time I hear of it. Like the wings of a trapped bird, the mild agitation in my friend's voice. But when she says the word, her voice, sibilant and soft, makes music of it. Corona, she says, once, and then again, with not a hint of the heaviness that is soon to befall us. The earth, vanishing in a rustle, a giant dust sheet. The earth, vanishing in a rustle, a giant dust sheet. Having flown the nest. My son calls from the faraway town where his university is. He's coming home, he says. His bags are packed haphazardly, I imagine, like an invasion of locusts. My flight, he begins. The school bell drowns out the voice I know so well, the voice that broke one summer many moons ago. A hatchling's call. In the peepal tree shade, always a mother. A hatchling's call. In the peepal tree shade, always a mother. Reminders. I fold the day's bad news into a black and white paper bird. COVID-19 tally, highest single day spike. This bird has lost its song, its spin. I tell myself I need to let it go, but my fingers refuse to unclasp. Hidden in the breath of friends, of strangers, this enemy I can't take my eyes off. Fearing death too often, washing hands. Fearing death too often, washing hands. The past is a door closed. I sit here thinking of the upside downness of things, like baobab trees. I think of all the ways there are or used to be of being young, of being middle aged or old or happy or sad, of all the ways of holding peace. Where have they gone? A dog's dream. In the midday quiet, no entry. A dog's dream. In the midday quiet, no entry. This one is called Where We Live. Where we live, the birds have grown quiet. It's a sullen quietness, like my daughter's when something occurs to extinguish temporarily her light. Where we live, there are a million reasons for sullenness, each a tree spliced to its roots, green sap bleeding rust, anxious flutter of wings, and interrupted human busyness. Where we live, we haven't the time for leaf vein and shimmer, for sweet rest and rustle wake, for bird song that rises in the morning green. Let me end with a short poem, um, sort of a happy, slightly happier poem, a poem that calls for us to pay attention to the few things that remain beautiful about this earth of ours. It's called The Happiness of Colds. There has not been for a long time a monsoon as beautiful as this one. Windows glimmer in the afterlight. Birds drink their fill. The skies are a runny ink. The earth is open, hopeful. A long poem on the rains has begun writing itself. Look, it's bolting into the rain now, a happy colt. Thank you.
Thank you, Srilata. The kind of highbone that you read on climate change was absolutely cutting in impact, and it was so beautiful. I'd love to talk more about it. So we have two very interesting things that are going to follow. First of all, we're going to talk to our panelists about the work that they read and just kind of delve into the thoughts that sort of created this beautiful work. And after that, we will announce there was this beautiful youth competition on climate change, which Bakul Foundation had organized. So we will announce the winner. And I'm looking forward to doing that. But before we go to that section, let me first address a question to Keki Daruwalla ji. In fact, it's not a question, Keki ji. I actually wanted to remind you of a beautiful poem that you've written, which I was privy to reading, but you didn't mention it today. I don't know if you can read it today, or has it gone into some sort of an archival sort of a place? Because there was this beautiful poem that you had called "Of Moss and Ledges." Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember. But I don't know where it is.
Oh, well, I'm glad I have it saved with me, so I will send it to you. But
Okay.
I would just like to know from you how do you feel about where this earth is going, and how are we responding to it? How as we as the literary fraternity is responding to it? What do you think about that?
the literary fraternity, I suppose, I mean, people who read a lot would know. They are responding to all these matters, but the government, the politicians, I mean, politicians the world over. I mean, you know what President Trump has done um, as far as this particular aspect is concerned. So uh, the world has to decide what we are to do with the planet. I mean, in my last article, I wrote there can be a pandemic or an epidemic that could wipe humanity completely off the face of the earth. Some such thing could happen one day. So, I mean, one shouldn't be so dismal, one shouldn't be so pessimistic, but we have to face these challenges. And we went through these ice ages, uh, but they didn't ruin the planet. Now that the other side is coming up, and the the waters are rising, the island kingdoms will go down, the coastlines will go down. I don't know what's going to happen to the world another 30 years later or 40 years later. That would be my answer. And I think we have to really get down to it, but not as an academic subject with writers tackle. Uh, it has to come from the heart. Something has to come really from the heart.
Yes, and it all has to be converted into action at some point in time. You're very
Yes.
right, Kiki. Priya, coming to you, your the piece that you have in Open Your Eyes is extremely interesting in terms of format. It has
Thank you.
it's formatted like a ecolit paper, and it has a combination of prose and poetry, and it has some extremely spiritual sort of a spiritual calming effect. You know, when you go through the entire piece. So,
Thank you.
could you tell us the process of how how you got around to devising a format like that?
Thanks, Vinita. I think part of it, since I also write speculative fiction, most of my speculative fiction is about climate change. I just found that is what's happening. We turn from the dystopic to perhaps more hopeful options that are possible. So this is a constant thread that is running in my mind. And with this poem, which is set in the near future, which, um, with this poem, I wanted to place the reader bang in the center of the poem so that, you're not just a passive reader or even proactive, but become responsible as far as possible, which is why I devised it as a question paper, which when you take, I hope you cannot resist answering the questions. Does penguin urine really make up 3% of Arctic ice? Yes, it does. So it's brittle and it's so I wanted to play with the idea because the facts are quite sad actually about climate change, and we have to go ahead and do something about it, which in our own ways as well. And yes, that was why. And I wanted to cover all the four stages, the four verticals of literature: poetry, fiction, non-fiction, and translation, because I think all the four verticals, all these can deeply help, awaken awareness. I'm a firm believer in the power of art to transform, at least for a short time, a vision, a person. So I didn't want to leave anything out and put it in.
I'm glad you didn't leave anything out. And as the editor of the anthology, I have received very, very positive comments about your
Thank you.
piece in particular. I have to share that.
Thank you.
Srilata,
Thank
you're welcome. Srilata, coming to
Yes.
your awesome haiboon that you just shared with us, and you also shared that it's something that you've kind of dappled in very recently, more recently than the other poetry that you've been
That's right.
writing. And
Yeah.
are they all themed around climate change, or did you just select those pieces for us in particular for
No,
this?
actually, this series of Haibun was written as part of a collaborative poetry art project called Held that was hosted by the Goethe Institute, Chennai. And it's available for viewing online now. It was essentially work in response, so to speak, to the lockdown, to the pandemic, to the very difficult present moment that we are living through. And literally, the first in the series was something that popped into my head. I was actually waiting outside. My daughter had to take her 12th board exams, and you know how hugely important this is in India. So I was actually waiting outside the exam hall for her to, sort of for her to go in actually, and then. And that's when a friend of mine came up to me and she said, there's this whole pandemic, and it didn't make sense to me then. It didn't seem like a real thing. I just brushed it off. I said, oh, okay, fine, and all of that. And surely enough, very next day, we went into this officially, it's a pandemic and, lockdown, and all the exams were postponed. And there was like hell, all hell broke loose in everyone's lives. Right. And yeah, so this was actually written in response to that, as a way of processing that very strange moment that, like none other in my life before. Yeah, and it's also a collective moment, right? It's what we go through with our children, with others, with friends, whole world. So, yeah.
And I'm also glad that one of the haibun that you read out was around COVID and Corona, and you
Yeah.
mentioned that fearing death, washing hands again and
Yes.
again.
Yeah.
So somewhere there is a perception that COVID and Corona and the virus is somewhere linked to climate change and
Yes.
something to do with tampering too much with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we
Absolutely.
got that. Yes, Priya.
Yeah,
Yes.
when talking about this, I think some of you might have seen on the TV a couple of days ago about this mammoth being, fossilized mammoth being
Yeah.
extracted from Siberia. And what is interesting is that it said the blood was intact. And one of the scientists made this very frightening comment that we can clone it. Now,
Oh dear.
you're cloning that. Possible, Jurassic Park here. But with that, think of the ice age pathogens that you're also coming across as permafrost recedes.
Yes.
And this is a constant anxiety, I think, for all of us. What happens when we face more and more pathogens? Because even now, the climate change we're facing now, is supposed to be the effects of what we put the earth through in the late 70s and early 80s. And I shudder to think how it would be in the future, unless we
Spoken
all do
like,
something very fast. Yeah?
yes. Spoken like a true speculative fiction writer.
I wish it wasn't true, but
I know it's not speculative fiction anymore. Cloning is a
I know.
reality, and it calls for another session altogether. We could just talk about cloning and climate change and the repercussions of that terrifying
Absolutely.
prospect. Absolutely. But um, I think we might just, considering the time constraint, could we just go into the section where we announce the winner and invite the winner to read his or her poem? So I went through these entries that came from this youth competition that Bakul had so generously and wonderfully organized. And I have to say that all the pieces were extremely wholesome, composite, and they really understood what climate change was all about, and they understood what we've done to Mother Earth, and the consequences are bound to follow. So, when I chose the winner, or let me announce the winner's name. Sanjeevani Mishra has won the competition. She's the yes.
Thank you so much.
Sanjeevani. Hello, congratulations.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you.
So the reason why I really liked your poem was because it focuses on the urban-rural divide, and it establishes the fact that rural life being more holistic is doesn't damage the earth as much as the urban landscapes and industrialization does. And then you made this point in your poem that uh, the rural areas have to pay just as much for climate change as the cities and the urban landscapes do. It is
Yeah.
a direct consequence of their action, but the villages are also paying the cost. So, may I invite you now to read your poem? Or would you like, Sujit, would you like to make some comments?
No, 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 no. Please, over to Sanjeevani.
So, by the way, her
Okay,
poem is
so
untitled, right? It's untitled. You didn't give a title to your poem, did you?
yeah, actually, I was really confused what to give it, what title to give to the poem. So I was like,
That's
maybe
all
I'll leave
right.
it to some other people.
Oh, yeah, some of the greatest poets have left some of their works untitled, so that's all right.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start reading my poem. I saw a gloomy field and walked up to this girl so shy. I asked her what happened here and the reason why. Nothing. Nothing happened, is what she said. There's no rain, all the plants are dead. There's no food, and my father's been on bed long past our rising time. I tried calling him when the sun shined on a new day with a new hope, but he doesn't seem to want to wake up. Worried, I asked her to check again, to which she said it's almost 10. It's time to go and feed the cows and milk them and collect the eggs from the hens then, before she leaves to sell them on in the nearby city that doesn't seem to like her. Out of curiosity, I asked her what made her think that way, to which she said, the city welcomes me in the meanest way. It's always the same every day. I cough a lot when I reach there. It feels like smoke, but I don't know where. It's like the town loves to play hide and seek. Even the nearer buildings look so bleak. Nothing's visible after a certain range. They say the city is better than the village, but it feels so strange as I look at them through the smoggy lens. I try to think how that can be. So to them, I ask, how's that possible when you can't even step out without a mask? Up above, you can't see the moon and the stars, and the clouds here look so dense, you'd finally think it'll rain again and good times will be back again. But father says these clouds are not even real. They come from that tall factory we see as we travel from the village to the city. They said the land was full of trees once, but isn't now worth even a glance, for it's now filled with waste that makes you sick. Not looking at it usually does the trick to save you from the sadness that comes your way from thinking about it. But there are days when you can't ignore it. No matter what anyone says, they have destroyed our land and they have destroyed our trees. I think about what she said and gave it a thought. I have long realized that we are all doomed sooner or later. But when you travel to places like this and talk to innocent people like her, you know the time has arrived. We have destroyed the trees and we have destroyed the land. We are destroying the lives of people who did no harm to us and to the nature in any which way, for which they don't even understand what's happening, and more importantly, why is it happening to them when all their life they have done very little to destroy this planet the way we, the people in the cities, do. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now is also I was asked to choose just one winner, but I couldn't resist picking out also a first runner-up and a second runner-up because all the poems were so encouraging and they were so true to the theme. So may I now announce the first runner-up, Agnish Dutt. Congratulations, Agnish. His poem was extremely. It had a very true perspective on fact. It was very composite, and the perspectives were in place. And Kinshuk Gupta is the second runner-up for a very well-researched poem and very powerful use of language. His poem was about harpooning of sharks and the way that men humanity is trying to exploit them for their benefits, regardless of what we are doing to the shark population and to planet Earth. So congratulations to all of you.
I just want to say, so like Keki sir said that the response to climate change has to come from the heart. So the good thing is there are young people like Sanjeevani who happens to be a core member not only of the Bhubaneswar Poetry Club, which is a club of young poets, and she's also a co-member of the Youth for Sustainability group here.
Oh,
And
that's
apart from her, while she's doing her studies in computer engineering, computer science engineering
oh,
at an engineering college here. So that's her identity.
that's wonderful. That is wonderful to hear. I didn't know
Vinita ji,
that.
I think we need to hear your poems. We haven't heard that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So
Wait,
maybe I will just read out one poem. Um, this is titled "For the Earth That's Losing Itself" after Dante di Stefano. So Dante di Stefano is an American poet who has a poem on abandoned children and what life does to these children. So I kind of saw a parallel when I read that poem. I saw a parallel about this earth also being a kind of an abandoned child. Although we talk of it as Mother Nature, it's also in a way an abandoned child because we're not caring for it enough. So for the earth that's losing itself by after Dante di Stefano. Write about shrinking spaces. Write about the color green. Write a line of chopped trees. Write a symphony of broken rings. Write yourself an optimist. Write about grandma's earth, in whose waters you could meet your eyes, feather touch hand pumps that sprung fountains, the jugalbandi of rains and tumescent ponds. Write about making love. Write yourself nostalgic. Write about now, the unstitched bellies of lakes, white, once the last skin of water disappears, summer criss-crossing powdery topsoil, imitating the open lips of death on an old mother's face. Write yourself vetoed. Write about Madhav, who marries thrice, each bride a water bride, fetching more water. Write about women who welcome co-wives, who put lumbago before self-esteem. Write about the dictates of water. Write yourself polygamous. Write about Kalidasa's Meghdut, whether we'll ever know a messenger like it again. Dark, dense, moist, generous, giving, godlike. Write about lynching reservoirs dry. Write yourself parched. Write yourself anhydrous. So may I just mention that this in Maharashtra there was actually a case where a man married thrice because the need for water was so much and the water was so difficult to fetch. It was so far away from where the villages were that it was too difficult for just for the woman of the house to manage it all by herself. And the man actually married thrice to bring more women into the house so they would bring more water. And none of the women minded because it was just a sharing of labor for them. It was easier for them to, because the back pain and the terrible hardships that they had to endure became less when three did the same work. So I found that extremely poignant, and I thought I would touch upon that in this poem. Well, thank you all very, very much. This has been a absolutely marvelous evening. Thank you, Keki. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Srilata. And thank you very much, Sujit, for putting this all together. And I hope that we can get this message across as we all need to as poets and writers. And that's the endeavor of this evening. And I'm sure that people who are viewing this and watching us will take back something constructive from what we've just read out to them. Thank you all very much for being here.
Would we
Thank
have
you.
time? Would you
Thank
have
you
Thank
time
you.
for
for
a few
everything.
questions from the audience?
And Sujit
Okay.
Mahapatra and Srilata and Priya. Thank
If
you.
if there are questions, we'd love to field them. Yes, please let us know.
So we'll just stay on for some more time just to see. I think if anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions to any of the poets, please write it down in the comments box and we will pose it to anyone has any questions. Please write down in the comments box. Vinita, if there's any other question you want to ask as the others are typing in, you can just do that. And we'll just wait for a couple of minutes to see if any questions come.
Sure. So, Priya, I wanted to ask you about the way Alvin has looked at the poem that you read out on
Yeah,
limits. Alvin
yeah,
has written a book. So
yeah.
he's touched upon the political angles of this whole, and he's
True.
written with written with a slightly sarcastic, a kind of a sarcastic tone, because sometimes you feel so resigned to what is happening that you need to have a jibe at these politicians. What would you like to say about that?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there is sarcasm there and despair in a sense, because he says talk, the heads of government talk the talk. And in this particular line, the winemaker says this is good for the high end, but the
Yes,
bottom tire is drying out, lacking the margin for water. In that simple sentence really, he gets the devastation of, and the injustice of what is happening with climate change, where the rich can still escape or buy what they want, and the poor, the others, are the ones that are suffering the most. So I found a
exactly.
lot of pithy um, points he was making, and this idea also of, which I mentioned, of elite anxiety, which is the anxiety that the elite face about losing their property. But it, which the
Yeah.
general populace doesn't really feel. In a crisis, the general populace is always helpful, but it's the elite that think everything's so, the malls are going to be burnt down to crisp and everything's going to be robbed. So he touches on that. So it's a complex poem too,
Yes.
but
Yes.
very strongly written.
Yes, wonderfully said, Priya. And I do agree with this whole capitalist line of, they're worried about their business and their income. And I would like to talk about capitalism and climate change in some other session, perhaps, because I've been reading a bit on that. We do have a question here from Shobhana Kumar. She asked, are you planning a sequel? So I guess it's addressed to me.
You
You just
should.
You just stole my thunder, Shobna, because yes, I am planning a sequel and I was about to announce it. So, uh, the reason why I'm planning a sequel is because this book is being received very warmly, and that makes me feel that there is more scope to talk about the subject. And there is more that needs to be said in the voice of poets and writers. So I haven't exactly planned what the sequel will look like, but I am planning a sequel, yes, very much so.
But Vinita, I would request you, I think as you read the wonderful poems submitted by the young poets for the competition, I think it would be wonderful to have a young poets edition, maybe an e-book with the poems that came in for the competition. We
That
could
would be
have that.
lovely.
We could
That would
have
be
that.
lovely. Yes, some of the
Thank you
work
so
needs
much.
editing because we, being poets of long, quote unquote, long standing, we are so particular about the craft. So the poems would need to be edited a bit. But yes, that's a very big possibility that we could definitely do a ebook on all the submissions that we got, and a young poets
Wonderful.
anthology would be in the offing for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you once again.
yeah. So, would any of you want to say anything as parting words? Keki sir, Srilata, Priyaji, any of you would like to say anything before we wind up?
Well, just a big thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
2015, I went to Alaska, and the greatest glacier was the ship was bang opposite the greatest glacier, which was breaking up, and we were told that each time the ice fell, the ice was as big as a ship. I mean, we couldn't see that it was that big, but the ice was breaking every few seconds, one shipload, let's say, every few seconds. So it was a graphic uh, situation where we were seeing the glaciers all coming down and right near the North Pole. It was terrible. I mean, that sight was terrible. Thank you.
You've actually witnessed it. You've actually seen it with your own two eyes. You know how it's happening.
Yes.
Shobna says here, sorry about not intended to steal your thunder. Shobna, I was just joking. I'm so glad you asked that question because it gave me the platform to announce that sequel here. Thank you so much for asking the question. Srilata, would you like to say anything as parting
No,
remarks?
just thank you so much to Sujit and Vinita, to you. And I enjoyed listening to all the poems and also the poem by prize winner. So, yeah, great evening. Thank you.
Priya, what about you? Any parting remarks?
Well, very much similar to what Srilata has said, because it has to. I mean, you brought out this anthology, which is significant. It's important, and and it is for our children actually that we write, right? For the future of the children. For those who we must plant trees which we will never sit under. So I think it's a very significant anthology, and of course, I'm delighted you're doing another one. And personally, it's been wonderful for me to read with Srilata and Keki and you, and on this platform, Sujit. Very good. I'm very happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Keki sir, for choosing the poem Bakula. Of course, in Sanskrit it is Bakula. In Odia also we say Bakula, but in Bangla they say Bakul, and in English we normally abbreviate it as Bakul. But it has been a real honor having all of you here. I'm really thankful to all of you, and I hope all the viewers here, it must have got you thinking and touched you. And I would request you to please share this video so that we get more people thinking and talking about climate change. So that is very important, and so that more of us reflect on our own lifestyle, on our own contributions to climate change, and so that we can reduce our footprint as well. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye for now.
In education that we are trying to promote reading. As statistics say, if 50% children in grade 5 cannot read the textbook of grade 2, then what is really happening? That's because the basic skills of reading and writing is not there. So we thought that if we have to change this cynicism, then we need to demonstrate what is possible with small contributions. So that is the idea basically that Bakul is trying to demonstrate, what is possible entirely with volunteerism, entirely with small little contributions. We asked people to contribute books to set up a public library in Bhubaneswar, and a children's library was set up in Bhubaneswar, and now that children's library has become a general library, a public library with more than 20,000 books. So that is one of the major things. Another major area of intervention is environment, a lot of environmental education, but through films and through creative methods. So we have a traveling film festival on environment. We go to schools, colleges, apartments and screen films on environment, primarily on climate change and on issues of water and sanitation, two issues that we're working in. And at the libraries also, we conduct a lot of workshops on creativity. We all want the world to be a better place, and we have our own ideas of how it can be better. The thing is, can we all start in some small way towards addressing that? Can we say that in some small way, this world is the way I want it to be because I have done something about it?